But without further ado, I want to kind of introduce you guys a little bit to the region that you're going to be virtually hiking through during this super cool adventure that Mark and Kelly have got going for you. You're hiking through a mountain range that's really near to my heart called the Sierra Nevada. And if I had a map of California, it would basically stretch from kind of northern California all the way down towards, I don't know, the middle. So it's a big mountain range. And I kind of wanted to give you a quick synopsis of the history in like a minute of like what the geology is there. And then kind of some of the features that you'll see. If there's this story in the landscape, right? And it's a progression, and it's always changing, and there's different forces in process there. For example, the landscape is typically, at least in the area we're talking about, it's actually rising upward from tectonic forces. So the mountains are actually going up, but then at the same time, you've got these forces of erosion that are kind of acting against that and pushing it down. So for example, like Mark was telling me recently about rockfall. So like that's a form of physical weathering, right? And then water is actually also a form of physical weathering, and it's removing material. So over time, you're really changing the landscape, and it's quite amazing. And the main rock type that you're going to be seeing there is called granite. And the really cool thing about granite, I think this one's working, is that in 2 seconds, I guess, this is a volcano. And this kind of goes into the story of the landscape that we're seeing and that you're hiking through, because down here you have a magma chamber. It's kind of like a pimple. You have magma coming out up here. And this is kind of like modern day Japan. And then you have a chamber full of magma down here. And this is kind of like what the Sierra Nevada looked like about 100 million years ago. Except those processes that I just mentioned have been acting on this area. And so the ground's been going up, and water has been raining down, and all of this has actually been eroded away and removed. And so the landscapes come up, and everything up here has actually been taken, and you see it at the beach nowadays. It's completely traveled, right? And so now what you're actually walking through is the granite. The Sierra Nevada is essentially just this, right? It's like the plumbing system of the volcano, which is super amazing. And it's still changing today. So for example, Yosemite, like it's this amazing, awe-inspiring monument to like awe, at least for me, right? And others. And it was actually carved by glaciers. Can't really draw that very well, but you carved it by glaciers. And so if you went into the valley, you would actually notice while you're hiking through that if you look down the valley, and this is kind of a river, it's the Green River, the Merced River in Yosemite, you've got these big walls, pardon my work getting in the way, maybe that's half down, and then some stuff over here. And that shape is just because in geologically recent time, you've carved it with glaciers, which is amazing. Like the other half of Half Dome, there is no other half. It was carved by glaciers. But then, I mean, this landscape, as you hike along the trail, you're going to be hiking towards Mount Whitney, which is the highest peak in the contiguous U.S. And that's actually for a reason, because when you stand and look to the east from Mount Whitney, you'll see a huge valley, and that's called the Owens Valley. I would show it. You can look it up on Google Earth. And there's this big drop off, right? And that's because there's actually active fault right there. And Mount Whitney is actually actively getting taller because the whole range is kind of tilting to the side. And so there's just so many interesting things about how this landscape is constantly changing. And I think that anyone who's hiking outdoors is kind of enriched by the knowledge that when they look around, everything there is not only precious and totally cool to look at, but it's also, what's the word, ephemeral. I always confuse perennial and ephemeral, but ephemeral, and it's constantly changing. Yeah, so it's a constantly changing landscape. You're going to be hiking through granite. You would be seeing these U-shaped valleys that were carved more recently by glaciers. And the glaciers that carved the valleys are the reason you're getting these large waterfalls, which people really love. And you get these valleys, and it's just amazing to see that, like, it's because of recent occurrences in geologic time that we're seeing these U-shaped valleys. If you give in a snapshot of geologic time, so another 10 million years, it's going to look entirely different.
Thanks for that, Colin. I agree. Like, I think that often you see something or see someplace and you think that it's always like that. And
Yeah, totally.
To realize that, one, it's not always like that. And then two, having an understanding that these mountains that we're seeing was not the top of the volcano, that's already worn away.
Totally.
And so that's, I was, appreciate the kind of how did things get to be the way that they are. And I think what you're talking about there with the glacial form valleys, a lot of our teams right now have been hiking through Lyle Canyon, which is all still part of Yosemite National Park. But Lyle Canyon, when you look on, you can get on the map, and I can even show that at the end of the presentation, that it is a classic glacial formed valley. And there's actually some glaciers that are still hanging out on Mount Lyle.
That's amazing.
I mean, they won't be hanging out forever.
Yeah, they're not going to last.
It's getting warmer. But I mean, there's signs all around you that this is how things came to be, if you know what signs you're looking for. And I think that, by knowing these things, knowing what to look for, it enriches the experience when you're outdoors. So
absolutely.
So yeah.